There are thoughts you have that do not belong to this lifetime. You know them by the way they arrive, not as ideas, but as recognitions, not as learning, but as remembering. A sensation moves through your chest before the thought even forms, a quiet certainty that makes logic feel slow, a familiarity so deep it borders on grief. This video is not for those who are curious. Curiosity asks questions. This requires surrender. For thousands of years, the priests of Egypt whispered of a memory that precedes thought, a layer of awareness older than language, older than identity, even older than fear. They did not call it the mind. They called it the inner archive. And guarding the doorway to that archive was not a god, not a demon, not a symbol. It was a key. Not a physical object, but a vibrational alignment, a precise internal configuration, a resonance that could only be accessed once the mind stopped trying to control it. They said Thoth did not give knowledge. He restored memory. Memory of who you were before you learned how to think incorrectly. The Hermetic texts warn that this key cannot be taught to those who seek power, validation, or identity. The moment the ego tries to use the key dissolves. What remains is confusion, obsession, or spiritual fantasy. This is why the temples were silent. This is why the rituals were indirect. This is why the most dangerous moment was not entering the chamber, but leaving it. Because once the memory behind your thoughts begins to awaken, you cannot go back to being comfortably unconscious. Tonight, you will not be given information. You will be guided into a state where thought loosens its grip, where the nervous system becomes an antenna, where the inner eye stops searching and starts receiving. If you feel resistance right now, good. Resistance means the lock is still active. If you feel curiosity mixed with fear, even better. That means the key has already found you. Before we begin, understand this. You do not need to complete this ritual perfectly. You do not need years of practice. You do not need belief. You need presence once. One correct entry into this state is enough to permanently alter the relationship between you and your thoughts. This is not metaphor. Modern neuroscience calls it memory reconsolidation. The Tibetans call it mind stream interruption. The Egyptians called it opening the chamber of Ma'at, the place where false narratives dissolve. Throughout this journey, you may feel pressure behind the eyes, a warmth in the spine, a sudden sadness without story, a remembering without images. These are not side effects, they are signals. At the end of this video, you will be invited to confirm, not to me, but to yourself, that the process has begun. And once you confirm it, even silently, the key will continue working long after the sound fades. Now, slow your breath. Not deeper, slower. Let the mind listen. Because what you are about to encounter is not new. It has been waiting behind your thoughts the entire time. This is not a symbol or object, but a vibrational alignment that unlocks the memory beneath thought itself. The mistake modern seekers make is believing that ancient wisdom was hidden because it was complicated. It was hidden because it was dangerously simple. The Hermetic Key is not something you visualize. memorize, chant endlessly, or intellectualize. In fact, every attempt to do it right tightens the lock. The ancient texts say the key appears only when the mind stops performing. I remember the first time I felt it. There was no vision, no light show, no divine voice, only a sudden, unnerving silence, as if the part of me that narrates reality had stepped out of the room. And in that silence, something ancient leaned forward. In Egypt, this state was induced in stone chambers with ceilings low enough to force humility. In India, it was approached through breath retention after mantra exhaustion. In Tibet, monks entered it after days of debate when logic collapsed under its own weight. Different methods, same doorway. Modern science brushes against this through studies on default mode network suppression, the moment the brain's storytelling circuits go quiet. Mystics discovered it long before machines could name it. The Hermetic Key activates when three conditions align. Not intention, not belief, not effort, but stillness, attention, and resonance. Stillness of the nervous system, attention without direction, resonance between breath, heart, and inner sound. This is why so many fail. They chase visions, they chase sensations, they chase meaning. The key opens when chasing ends. Now I want you to participate carefully. Close your eyes. Do not imagine anything. Instead, notice the space between thoughts. At first, it feels like trying to see darkness with your eyes open. The mind panics. It rushes to fill the gap. Thoughts appear louder. Let them. Do not fight. Now breathe in slowly through the nose for a count of 6. Hold, not forcefully, for 2. Exhale through the mouth for 7. Again. As you breathe, bring your attention not to the breath itself, but to the moment right after the exhale ends. That tiny pause. That pause is the first crack in the lock. Ancient Egyptian initiates called it the breathless gate. Yogis call it Kevala Kumbhaka. Neuroscientists call it parasympathetic dominance. Names don't matter. The sensation does. In that pause, you may feel a faint hum, not audible but perceptible, like pressure without weight, like sound without vibration. That hum is not created. It is remembered. This is the memory behind your thoughts. Not memories of childhood, not past lives, but the remembering function itself, the layer that existed before identity learned to speak. When this layer activates, thoughts stop feeling personal. They pass like weather. This can be frightening. Many people abort here, mistaking loss of narrative for loss of self. The Hermetic warnings are clear. Those who cling to their story will experience fragmentation. If fear arises, return to the breath. If emotion surfaces without cause, do not analyze it. This is crucial. Analysis relocks the door. The key works only in direct perception. I once watched a man in a retreat break into tears during this phase, not because he remembered trauma, but because the voice that judged his trauma went silent. He said later it felt like grief dissolving without needing forgiveness. That is the danger and the gift. Because once the memory beneath thought awakens, you can never fully believe your inner narration again. You will still think, still plan, still worry, but something watches now, something ancient, something calm. This is why the priests warned that doing this once is enough, because the observer does not unawake. As we move deeper, you will learn how thought encoded this alignment into sound, posture, and inner gaze, and how misuse leads not to enlightenment, but obsession. Before continuing, pause the video. Sit in silence for 30 seconds. If you felt even a flicker of stillness, comment, "The memory has stirred." This is not engagement, it is confirmation. This is the layer of awareness that thinks before you think, and remembers before you remember. There is a moment that comes after the first silence, and it is rarely described honestly, because it is uncomfortable, because it destabilizes the spiritual personality, because it reveals something most people are not prepared to see, that the voice you call yourself is not the origin of thought, it is the echo. The ancient initiates did not fear demons or gods during this stage. They feared misidentification, mistaking the witness for the narrator, or worse, mistaking the narrator for the self. The Hermetic texts describe this phase with a single chilling line. When the tongue of the mind loosens, the memory beneath it begins to speak, but not in words. I still remember the first time it happened to me. I was not meditating properly. I was tired, annoyed, almost bored with the practice. And then, without warning, a thought appeared, not as language, but as knowing. It did not say anything. It recognized something, and the recognition felt older than my name. This is the memory behind your thoughts. Not autobiographical memory, not symbolic memory, but structural memory. The memory of how awareness organizes reality before concepts touch it. Modern neuroscience circles this phenomenon through studies of pre-verbal cognition and implicit memory. Tibetan masters spoke of it as the storehouse consciousness. Egyptian priests encoded it into the geometry of chambers designed to disorient linear thinking. Different languages, same threshold. When this layer activates, many people make the same mistake. They search for meaning. They want visions, past lives, messages, identity upgrades. But the Hermetic Key does not add content. It removes distortion. And removal feels like loss. Now we go deeper, carefully. Close your eyes again. This time, do not focus on breath. Instead, listen for the voice that labels experience. Not the sound of it, but the impulse, the moment something arises and the mind says, "This is happening." Catch that moment. Not the word, the reflex. This is subtle, almost invisible. You may feel a tightening behind the forehead when you notice it. That is normal. That is the habit resisting observation. Now, and this is critical, do not suppress the voice. Do not argue with it. Simply watch the gap between the impulse and the word. That gap is microscopic, but it exists. Ancient initiates trained for years just to feel that gap once, because inside it lies the original memory of perception, perception before language carved reality into pieces. As you rest attention there, something strange may occur. Thoughts may speed up or slow down or fragment. You might feel a rush of confusion, like trying to remember a dream that dissolves the moment you look at it. This is not failure. This is the mind reorganizing. Psychology calls this destabilization. Mysticism calls it purification. Hermeticism calls it the shaking of the false throne. Warning, and this matters. If you try to hold this state, it collapses. If you try to describe it internally, it vanishes. The memory behind thought does not tolerate ownership. This is why many who touch this layer become obsessed, anxious, or spiritually inflated. They mistake proximity for possession. Thoth's warnings were not moral, they were technical. Do not cling to the gate, the tablets say. It is not a room. Now, let us introduce sound, not spoken, but internal. In ancient Egypt, initiates were guided to hear without ears. In India, this was called anahata nada, the unstruck sound. Here is how you approach it safely. Take a slow breath in. As you exhale, imagine the faintest possible not voiced, not hummed, but remembered. If you hear nothing, good. If you feel pressure, warmth, or subtle vibration, better. If you feel nothing at all, do not try harder. The key responds to receptivity, not force. At some point, and it may be fleeting, the inner narrator pauses. Not silence, suspension, like a sentence that forgets to finish itself. In that suspension, memory awakens. Not memory of something, memory as something. You may feel suddenly intimate with existence, or detached from identity, or gently amused by your own mental habits. Some feel fear. This fear is not danger. It is the ego encountering irrelevance, and irrelevance feels like death to the personality. The ancients prepared initiates for this with only one instruction. If fear arises, do not move. Stillness stabilizes the field. Movement reasserts control. This is where side effects appear if done incorrectly. If you force this state repeatedly, you may experience emotional flatness, obsessive introspection, disconnection without clarity. These are signs of partial unlocking, touching the gate without integrating the nervous system. That is why this practice is not repeated compulsively. Once is enough. Because once the memory behind the voice is recognized, it continues to surface naturally during walks, conversations, moments of quiet. You will notice thoughts forming after awareness notices something. This reversal is irreversible, and it is the beginning of freedom. Pause here. Let the system settle. If you felt even a brief suspension of the inner voice, comment, "I witnessed the gap." This is not affirmation, it is alignment. This is where memory stops being personal and becomes structural, and where many initiates quietly turned back. There is a reason the ancient temples did not celebrate this stage. No murals, no hymns, no promises of bliss. Only warnings etched so faintly into stone that most translators dismissed them as ceremonial poetry. They were not poetry. They were technical cautions. Because when the memory behind thought stabilizes, something else begins to surface, not gently, not symbolically, but inevitably. The inner archive. This is the layer that terrifies modern spirituality, because it does not flatter the seeker. It does not confirm identity. It does not reward effort. It simply reveals what has always been running in the background. I remember the night it opened for me. Not dramatically, no ritual chamber, no incense, no chanting monks. I was brushing my teeth, and suddenly a familiar emotional pattern arose. Irritation, defensiveness, the old tightening in the chest. I watched it form. I watched the thought assemble around it. And then, something snapped. Not emotionally, structurally. The entire sequence revealed itself at once, like seeing the gears inside a clock while it's still ticking. I wasn't in the reaction anymore. I was watching the program that generated it. That is the inner archive.
The Egyptians believed it stored not memories of events, but instructions, how the mind learned to respond, protect, attach, withdraw. The Tibetans called these karmic imprints. Modern psychology calls them subconscious conditioning. Different names, same machinery. The danger is not seeing this machinery. The danger is thinking you can edit it at will. Because once the archive is visible, many people rush to interfere. They try to rewrite patterns. They attempt to delete emotions. They chase permanent peace. This is where initiates failed. This is where monks lost grounding. This is where seekers became hollow. The Hermetic texts describe this phase with a brutal clarity. Those who attempt to rearrange the archive before understanding it will fracture the witness. Why? Because the archive is not separate from the nervous system. It is embodied. Every emotional reflex you see corresponds to breath patterns, muscle tone, hormonal cascades. When you try to override it mentally, the body resists, and resistance manifests as anxiety, dissociation, or obsession. This is why the ancient path did not rush. This is why the ritual was indirect. Now listen carefully. This is the most important instruction so far. You do not change the inner archive by doing anything to it. You change it by seeing it completely. Neuroscience confirms this through memory reconsolidation. When a pattern is observed without reinforcement, it destabilizes and rewrites itself naturally. The mystics knew this without machines. They called it illumination without interference. Now we practice, gently. Sit comfortably, eyes closed. Let the breath be natural. Do not regulate it. Bring attention to the first emotional tone that appears. Not a thought, an emotional flavor. Maybe restlessness, maybe boredom, maybe calm. Do not name it. Do not explain it. Just feel where it lives in the body. Chest, stomach, jaw, back of the neck. Now, and this is subtle, notice the urge to move away from it. That urge is part of the archive. Stay. If fear arises, stay. If discomfort intensifies, stay. This is not endurance. This is non-interruption. Something remarkable happens here. The pattern begins to complete itself without narrative. No story, no justification, no identity attached. Just sensation unfolding and dissolving. This is how archives erase themselves, not through effort, through completion. Many people cry here, not because of pain, but because they realize how long they have been carrying unfinished loops. This is why the ancients said just one correct encounter can change the being forever. Because once the system learns it can resolve without narration, it never fully returns to old habits. But here comes the final warning of this section. Do not romanticize this state. Do not seek it compulsively. Do not build identity around being aware. Awareness that clings becomes another archive. I have seen people get stuck here, endlessly observing, never living, mistaking detachment for wisdom. Thoth warned against this explicitly. The watcher who refuses to descend will forget how to walk among humans. Integration matters. After this practice, you return to life. You engage, you speak, you participate, but something is different. The archive no longer runs unchecked. It is seen, and what is seen loses authority. Pause now. Let the system rest. If you felt an emotional pattern resolve without story, comment, "The archive revealed itself." This is not a badge. It is a grounding statement.
This is where memory and life reunite, and where the true test begins. The ancient initiates feared this stage more than the chamber itself, not because it was difficult, but because it was ordinary. There is a deep misconception, encouraged by modern spirituality,
that awakening feels like floating above life, detached, luminous, unbothered. The Hermetic tradition considered that state a failure because the purpose of the key was never escape, it was return. Return with clarity, return with memory intact, return without being ruled by it. Thoth's final instruction was never given inside the temple. It was given at the doorway, just before the initiate stepped back into the street. And it was devastatingly simple. If the memory cannot walk, it is not yet true. I remember my own return. Nothing changed on the outside. The same city, the same noise, the same obligations. But something fundamental had shifted. Thoughts still appeared, but they no longer arrived as commands. Emotions still rose, but they no longer demanded obedience. Fear still visited, but it no longer owned the future. This is integration, and integration is where most teachings fall silent, because integration cannot be dramatized, it cannot be monetized, it cannot be aestheticized. It shows up as pauses in arguments, as space before reaction, as a strange gentleness toward your own mistakes. The Egyptians encoded integration through posture, the Tibetans through walking meditation, the Indians through karma yoga, action without attachment. Different forms, same principle. Now you will seal the work, not permanently, but stabilizingly. This is not a ritual, it is a physiological reset. Sit upright, feet on the ground, hands resting naturally. Bring awareness to the spine, not visualizing energy, but feeling alignment. Now inhale gently. As you exhale, imagine, not picture, but sense weight dropping downward, from the head, through the chest, into the pelvis, into the feet. This downward settling is crucial. Without it, awareness floats. Floating awareness becomes dissociation. The ancients warned against this relentlessly. Now silently repeat, not as a mantra, but as recognition. I remember without leaving. Say it once, do not repeat. Repetition weakens meaning here. Notice what happens. For many, there is a subtle sense of arrival, like being fully inside the body for the first time in a long while. This is the seal. The key does not close the door again, but it prevents fragmentation. From now on, memory will surface naturally, not all at once, not dramatically, in fragments, in moments. A reaction that doesn't complete, a thought that loses momentum, a fear that dissolves before convincing you. These are signs of success. Side effects may include reduced tolerance for dishonesty, especially your own, temporary disinterest in spiritual content, heightened sensitivity to environments and people, a quiet grief for old identities. These are not problems, they are recalibrations. And here is the final truth the Hermetic tradition rarely states openly. Once the key has turned, you will never again fully believe that you are your thoughts. You may still identify with roles, still enjoy stories, still play the game, but somewhere underneath, memory hums, not loudly, reliably. This is why the work was never taught widely. A population that remembers too much becomes difficult to rule. Now, before we close, there is something you must do, not for me, not for the channel, but for the field. The ancients believed that memory stabilizes faster when acknowledged aloud or in writing within a witnessing group. This is not social engagement, it is resonance. So if you feel the process has begun, even faintly, comment one of the following. The journey has begun. I remember without leaving. The key has turned. Choose only one. Do not explain. Do not elaborate. And if this video found you at the right moment, consider subscribing, not as support for content, but as an alignment with a living archive. Each person who subscribes, shares, or comments adds coherence to this field, a modern echo of the ancient temples, where memory was preserved not in books, but in people. Carry this gently, live normally, and let the memory do the work.